Have you ever wondered how it's possible to stand faultless before God's glory? Good morning and welcome back. It's so good to be joining with you today. This devotional this morning is going to teach us how to stand faultless before God's glory. We're talking about the sanctuary, the sanctification, and the healing, or sealing rather, that Christ provides. Our scripture comes from Jude chapter 24, and it simply says, "Now unto him that is able to keep you from falling and to present you faultless before the presence of his glory with exceeding joy." We say Jude 24 because, again, book Jude is only one book, but one book with some very powerful messages. So here's the thing. Yesterday we talked about obedience to Christ and how we can overcome sin, right? But we got to understand what Christ was obedient to. Some people may look at it and like, well, Christ came down to earth. He came in human form, but he was Christ. It was easy for him to obey and follow the law. Well, Christ was obedient to every part of the law. Some people may have you believe, some people, we're going to say the enemy, Satan, him. He would have you believe that it is hard to follow God's law, but following God's law is not hard. Christ was obedient to every requirement of the law. So by his perfect obedience, we have an example of how we can overcome sin, how we can obey the law. He's made it possible for every human to obey God's law. So when some people say it's hard, it may be hard. The hard part is turning away from the desire to sin. Because let's face it, as we discussed yesterday, Satan's been perfecting his game. He's been studying you and me. He knows what we're looking for. He knows what's going to cause us to stumble. The things that cause us to stumble are the things we want to do because of our sinful nature. So we have to be careful in saying that we can't stop doing this or can't stop doing that. And we have to start saying, yes, I can obey God's law. Here's how we're going to do it. Okay? If we look at Christ's example as, Christ's example of following the law, how did he follow the law? Well, I know Ten Commandments says, don't steal. I know the Ten Commandments says, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. I know Jesus told us to love our neighbors as ourselves. Are we doing those things? You might not be doing everything perfectly, but if you work on one thing, one day, one step at a time, you'll end up following Christ's law. And even if you were following Christ's law and you aren't following Christ's law now, guess what? You can still turn away from sin. All you got to do is make a commitment in your heart. Follow Christ. Ask the Lord to help you. Ask the Lord to sanctify you, to seal you, and to save you. That's his purpose. Remember, when we submit ourselves to Christ's heart, we unite with his heart. We unite with his strength. And the thoughts that brought us into captivity will no longer be existing in our mind as long as we have him. In your mind, think about it like this way. Your mind cannot be filled with Christ or filled with sin. Which one do you want? Remember, as the Lord looks upon us, he doesn't see our figurative leaf garments. Remember Adam and Eve, when they sinned, they had to cover themselves with fig leaves. So the Lord's not seeing us, but Christ is covering us with his own robe of righteousness, which is perfect to the law of God. So understand, sanctification is the process of being made holy. Us, are not holy. Okay? We're steeped in sin. But we have our lives transformed to reflect Christ's righteousness. Through the plan of salvation and the plan of redemption God has provided for every human sinful trait to be subdued, every human trait to resist temptation. If you're baking a pan of brownies, the smell is quite pleasant. The aroma is it goes up your nasal passages to your olfactory senses, and even if you didn't bake the brownies, you know that as soon as that smell hit your nose, oh, you know there's some brownies in the oven. But we have to be consistent. If God said, hey y'all, I know it smells good, I know it looks good, but don't touch the brownies, they're poisonous, would you still eat the brownies? And that's what it takes to overcome sin. We have to make a choice to follow Christ's obedience. We have to make a choice. In your mind, make a conscious choice to say, hey, I'm going to yield to the pressure of sin and I'm going to do what I want to do. Or you can say, you know what, Lord? I'm going to follow you. You said this is bad for me. I'm going to follow you. You said you put laws in place to help me stop stumbling. I'm going to follow you. And as Paul said, we have to die to ourselves daily. Remember, ourselves have a sinful desire. Okay? Me, I will get a knife and fork. Well, not fork because I don't eat brownies with a fork. But I will get a knife. I will slice them brownies up and I will eat them brownies. Yes, God said it's poisonous, but the brownies is still good. So I'm going to eat poison and happy brownies. No, that's not a good thing. You got to make sure that you understand it's not our own acts that save us. It's our choice and our willingness to follow after Christ. It's our choice and our willingness to understand that He already paid the price, that salvation is offered free to us. It's our choice and our willingness to understand that by sanctification that we are made holy. And the only way to be sanctified is to follow after Christ, is to follow after His example and be obedient to the will of God. How can we stand before God and in His presence, in His glory? How can we be presented faultless? How can this sinner right here be presented faultless? Simple. We have to make sure we make that choice every single day. You might not make it perfectly in your eyes, but if you keep striving to disrobe of your human nature and put on God's nature, then you'll start to see it gets easier and easier and easier. I hope everyone took a shower today, or you're about to. If you can imagine how the dirt washes off, how the soap comes and cleanses things, how we scrub, that scrubbing that you do, that's when we wash away sin daily from our lives. When we make a conscious choice, I'm going to follow after God. I'm going to follow after God. I'm going to follow after God. The devil would have you to believe that following after God is boring. It is not. It really is not. But that's one of his tactics, to say, hey, you need to stay with me. It's okay. You can do this. God understands. But one by one, he's trying to pull you away from God. No one steps away from God fully and just takes a big leap. It starts with the little choices that we make. So understand, with the little choices that we make, let us commit ourselves to following the divine principles that are set before us. Embrace the combined strength of Christ's humanity and His divinity nature so that we can overcome the power of sin and reflect Christ's glory. How can we stand faultless in the presence of God? Simple. When we make that choice, we reflect Christ's glory. So it's not us that God is looking at. It's Christ. Remember, little choices, big reward. Which one are you going to choose? Thank you for joining us for today's devotional. May we all seek the strength and righteousness that Christ offers. May you continue to live for that one day where we will dwell in God's sanctuary, sanctified, sealed, and purified. Ladies and gentlemen, y'all have a great day.